Gear up, because this is the Fuel Your Marketing podcast, designed to accelerate sales and grow your business. Let's welcome your host, Arti Sharma.
Hello and welcome to the Fuel Your Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Arti, yet again with another powerful session and podcast episode. Our guest today is truly at the forefront of go-to-market innovation. She's a dynamic strategist, revenue catalyst at GTM Flow, a coach, and has tenured in the GTM and AI space. And I'm not going to take the thunder away. Please join me in welcoming Joelle Kaufman. Joelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Arti. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure as well to have you, and thank you for agreeing to be on the show. You know what? Today, I may not have done justice. I definitely want our listeners to know a little bit more about you and share your story a little bit. And you've gone through so many curveballs. I want to hear all about them and how you navigated.
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't know how one actually hits a true curveball, but I knew how to hit a metaphorical one. Because when I was 13, my story begins with sitting in the living room of my parents' house and my parents telling us that mom's going in the next day for surgery and they think it's breast cancer. My mother was 36 years old. My mother was an athlete, gorgeous, great health. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was a curveball. But this one, while very uncomfortable for her surgically, it was surgery and that was it. And she recovered because she was young and strong. But then it came back when I was 15 and a half. And that time, it brought with it, I will call it a succession of curveballs. The chemo curveball, the radiation curveball. And because it takes time, there was a lot of loneliness in that curveball. And one of the things, when you step up to the plate, you feel like you're alone. That's not true. And I want your listeners to know that. It's one of the biggest lessons I got early in my leadership journey. That feeling of responsibility that sits on your shoulders and is bringing you down. You can share it. That doesn't mean shirking responsibility or accountability, but it means you have other people on your team. And those other people are bringing different strengths and can add to even how you see what's coming at you. So I took this young experience with curveballs. And then as I proceeded into business and into life, and by the way, cancer keeps coming up in my family. It's a thing for us. But I threw myself into business and into technology. Now, the thing about if you're going to go into startups and technology, you better like curveballs because they're constant. I mean, you've been an entrepreneur so many times, you know this. Everything's going great. And then your largest customer has a major crisis and they suddenly aren't your largest customer. And you're trying to figure out, how do I make payroll? Am I going to be able to invest in the things I wanted to invest in? And there's a legitimate feeling of panic. That's a curveball. If you react from your limbic nervous system and you're reactive, you might get it right. You might be a hero. You might do a diving save of the customer. You and I both know those aren't long-term saves. It doesn't work long-term. And you're exhausted. And your team is wondering why they're there. So when you learn how to approach a curveball, and you learn it from baseball, how do you think before you even step into the game? I might see a curveball. If I see a curveball, what's my plan? So when I work with people now, I say, look, there are go-to-market curveballs every day. A campaign that worked last week, your competitors saw it, they're probably copying it. It's not going to work as well next week. That's life. The event, hey, there's a pandemic, whoops. And they haven't caught up. They haven't it's been almost 4 years and people are still not on solid ground. Curveballs. So what's your approach to the curveball? So what I do with my clients, Arti, is I take my 25 years of go-to-market experience, my 40 years of cancer life experience, and I say, let's work on two things, your approach and the application of your approach. Your approach is that routine, the set of things you do every time, whether you see a curveball or not, that give you the highest probability of success. Your applications are all the different things in leadership, in marketing, in sales, in negotiations, in AI that test your approach and give you opportunities to adjust and refine.
I resonate with you because I was in grade 9 when I had some of similar curveballs thrown at me when my mom had a, vascular surgery plan. My brother was in, he was 5 years old, and those are the kind of things that you deal and navigate. And then when those things happen, you kind of, take on a lot. So totally get it. And I'm so amazed at how you're integrating your life experiences into business experience and your leadership experiences over the years, because problems are the same. The magnitude changes, the emotional involvement of those problems changes, right? And then how do you handle those and use your resources and your inner, I think, strength to come up with solutions also changes. Sometimes you hit it, sometimes you miss it. We've all made mistakes as leaders, and I'm sure we'll continue to make them. The good thing is that you're at least trying to find a solution. In the process, you're not perfect, and I think we need to accept that as well. So thank you for sharing that. So going back to how you're kind of integrating your experiences, personal experiences and business experiences post COVID, all businesses are changing and navigating through so many changes. And now OpenAI's announcements 18 months ago, GPT, AI, all of this is coming into being. But AI is not being, AI is not new, and we'll touch upon that in a bit. But all these economic shifts that are happening, market saturation is happening. Buyers are evolving. What are some of the biggest and curveballs that you've seen companies face, and how do resilient go-to-market strategies and systems help them, adapt or stay afloat?
So I think the biggest curveball is obviously capital went from being free to being expensive. And a lot of the capital providers actually had to reserve their capital for their companies. You see this with large companies reducing their investment spend. So they're not buying, they're reducing their marketing spend. And the buzzword in tech has been growth efficiency or efficient growth. I happen to love efficient growth. I've always loved efficient growth. But your company is called Measure Marketing. I love the name and I love measurement. And I think measurement can also be the worst thing that ever happened to a marketer. Because if you measure and optimize for the wrong thing, you're going to have inefficient marketing, very frustrated sales partners, and you may alienate your market and damage your brand. So growth efficiency and how to grow 20% with 25% less budget, that's a pretty serious curveball. It's stressful. You have to fire people, which is sad. And often we like these people. We're not firing people because they did a bad job. We're firing people because of business conditions. And we know we're putting them into a job market that's not easy. So I think that's the curveball a lot of leaders are facing right now. Now, I'll add to it, when capital was free, lots of businesses got oversaturated. We are seeing that even with the Gen AI, right? I think there's 7,000 Gen AI companies. That's a lot of Gen AI companies, right? So we know there's going to be consolidation and fallout. As a leader, when you're saying, how do I grow efficiently? And I started with, I love efficient growth. I love it because scarcity forces focus, and focus is the key to success.
The theory of constraints.
Exactly. The theory of constraints. So scarcity breeds focus, focus breeds success. So scarcity can breed success. Now, you can starve and then you won't be successful. So there's a balance here. But what the scarcity of, or the scarcer resources that we're dealing with, means we have to be very thoughtful about who we are marketing to. And when I talk with clients, I say, look, who has an urgent problem that you solve 10 times better? You're not going to create urgency. The urgency exists or doesn't exist. But when you know who has the urgent problem and you know that you can solve it 10 times better and prove it. And I don't mean prove it with ROI studies. I mean, prove it where you feel it in your kishkas. You're like, they want your product. If you took your product away from them, imagine right now if someone said, Arti, you may not use any generative AI. You're not allowed. You'd go out of your mind,
Yeah. I
right?
have my own GPT trained too, just like you.
Exactly. So why shouldn't you have? But that's how you want people to respond to your product. Now, if I told you you could not use ChatGPT, but you could still use Claude and Gemini, you might say, hey, I'll use Grok, I'll use the Facebook one, like I'll work it out. So even they face the what makes you 10x better than the others in your category. And you need to know the answer. You need to build your product around the hypothesis of this is what is going to be so impactful to our precise customer. When we do that, and then we work with measure marketing and we say, this is how we're so much better. This is the proof we have of it. And this is who we're going after. Now we can do some very efficient pipeline generation. And when I mean efficient, I mean we're getting the right people who are converting to meetings that are productive. They are either qualified now or they are valuable enough to nurture because when this pops up to their urgency level, they will be qualified. That's fantastic. Let's fill our pipeline with people we can make wildly successful who need us.
Yeah, and so it's about knowing your ideal customer is one part of the equation, but I think building your services to solve your customer's problem is how I think you build resilience in one way. That's what you're aiming as well. And I think with these, and this doesn't happen when you have misaligned teams or you don't pivot at the right time. So talk to me a little bit more about your experience. Have you seen organizations what are the pitfalls of not pivoting at the right time? And what are the stakes? And if the stakes are high, what level of stakes could be?
Let's talk about a bad pivot and a good pivot. It's really hard to know when to pivot. And I don't think you ever get it quite right. You have to be adjusting. So I joined a company and it was actually B2C. I wanted to explore my own B2C muscles. And the idea was it was a dating site, find someone to date but it was like a social dating site that your friends can actually chime in on who you should meet or what they think and what have you. And the founder CEO said to me, Joelle, this is viral. Someone's going to come on, they're going to invite all their friends. So I said, cool. Let me see. I'd like to see some data about how many people the average new user invites and when. Crickets. I didn't think that was a hard question. And they said, well, we don't have data. It's like, how do we not have that data? We haven't instrumented for it. I said, okay, stop everything else. And we need to get some analytics and some CRM data because we're flying blind right now. And so I stopped everything and that's all we did for 3 weeks. Got some data. Now you have to collect data. You know how this goes. So about 6 weeks later, I meet with the CEO and I said, it's not viral. Right? Viral by definition is every user is bringing in a exponential number of other users, right? Slack is viral. Facebook is viral, right? Because frankly, they're no good if you don't have people to use them with. They just
Monday.com is viral, right?
Right. So I said, it doesn't work. We need to make a shift. And by the way, just dating myself, at that point, Facebook had just gone broader than colleges. Like it was that early. I said, I think we need to figure out how to be an app on Facebook, how to help people find people on Facebook. And I'm not sure they want their friends chiming. He's like, no, this is going to work. We just have to get the product right. I'm like, I don't see it in the data and I don't see it in the customer interviews. I don't think, yes, people want to meet people. That's a need. But I'm not sure this is how they want to do it. And so we didn't pivot and that company actually died. And I left probably about 6 months in, because I said, I can't help you if we're not willing to make experiments and adjustments. Now, switch to a different company. I tell this story because this is a huge curveball. I walk into the office. I have launched this company. The customers refer to the technology as magic, right? It's that good. It's an AI company. Okay.
Wow.
And what it does is it gets your long tail products and services discovered and indexed in very legitimate and useful ways. So my husband is looking for a fitness tracker that is a USB-C charger. It's a very specific need. It doesn't exist. But if you happen to sell it, you want to get that search. You want to get that interest. Think of it as SEO optimization, for the long tail.
And the buyer intent.
And the buyer intent, right. And not manipulative, like you have to be looking for it. It's not pushing anything at you. So I walk into the office, Arti, and the office, which is one of those open floor plans, it's 8:30 in the morning. The business team's all there. My SDRs, my market, it's silent, which is really hard to do in an open floor plan. And I look at a couple of people, I was like, did somebody die? What's going on? They said, we think we may have died. What? We have a $40 million business. We've got great customers. And I said, well, where are the founders? They said, they're in the back conference room. I'm like, okay. So I walk calmly, find them. Like, what's going on? We don't know. But overnight, it's like our whole system stopped working. Every one of our customers there, it's all down. It's, this could be the end of us. I said, wow, that's a curveball. Are we sure we're seeing it right? Did we introduce new code? No. Okay. Do you think Google or somebody else made a big change? Maybe. Is there anything we can do to learn more? Well, I guess we could call a couple of our customers and see how they're doing and what they're thinking. Great. Let's start exploring and let's rally the troops for exploring, because I don't think we're dead. We may be set back a little bit, but we have money in the bank. We've got good people. We're very creative. Let's see what we're dealing with. And so we started calling customers, and here's what happened, Arti. Every one of our customers thought they had introduced code that had damaged them. Everybody's traffic had fallen off a cliff, and everyone was in a panic in their silo. So you and I talked earlier about siloitis within a company, but even customers don't call each other and say, hey, I think I fucked up. Did you fuck up? They don't say that, right? They're all trying to look good. But we could call all of them, and we start talking to them, and they're all telling us, thank you for calling. I was so worried that we did something, because it's not just where you are, it's everywhere. So we identified that there was a global problem, and it was unintentional. And it was something that Google had done, but they didn't do it on purpose. They weren't trying to kill e-commerce. That's not their game. And, over 48 hours, it all got fixed and we were fine. Then came the pivot. CEO, to his great credit, reflected. He said, I would like to never see that curveball again. We have to diversify our business fairly dramatically. Our customers trust us. Our customers like us. We have a great AI technology. We call it the Web Intelligence Engine. And it really understands all these products and all these behaviors. What else could we apply it to? And over the next 5 years, he brought in companies and acquired them that applied it to email marketing, to websites, to the content management, and really transformed the business. So now that business is a multi-unicorn with multiple lines of business, great customers, and it's because we faced a really serious curveball.
Yeah, that's a really good case study in a use case because a company really needs to leverage those curveballs and learn from those and kind of pivot from those experiences. But I think it takes a lot of strong leadership and balanced and focused leadership to be able to craft that vision from that curveball pivot and then craft that vision to succeed, as you said. And I always say, it's easier to turn a sports car, but it's harder to change the direction of a ship, right? So if you have to do that, you always need leadership at the top. And that brings me to the fact that, leadership lessons we both have learned along the way. Sometimes you make mistakes and sometimes you have successes from your decisions. How do you think in today's tech-enabled, data-driven world, leaders must make decisions to carve out strategies that are going to create those profitable, efficient growth that we all are looking for, especially in the B2B SaaS arena, if you will, in terms of decision making? You said, you know, of course, investment is lower. Rule of 40 is in effect, 20% growth, top line, 20% profitable growth. Talk to me a little bit about those decisions that must be made today to stay that resilient self, those profitable self as organizations. Of course, from my experience, I can say hire when you really need to hire, so that you don't are not putting people out of jobs and also not throwing them into the market where there's job scarcity. So do your bit and be more informed as a leader on that front. But what other things would you say are important to keep those organizations profitable?
So I think you have to be deeply passionate about serving your customers. That doesn't mean you do everything they ask for. When my customers, I remember my first tech company, I had done a very big deal with Barnes and Noble, and they kept asking for more things as we were doing the implementation. And by the third time, I turned to them and said, that thing's going to cost $50,000. And they said, oh, I said, it's out of scope. I don't think it's a critical path, but if you want it, I can ask the guys to do it, but I have to charge you for it. And they said, oh, I don't think it's worth $50,000. I said, good. Then let's move on, right? So you have to be passionate about serving your customers, but you have to be a partner. And a partner is a critical thinker who says, is that urgent? Is that needed? Is that going to really help? Sometimes customers will tell you, what's the saying? Like if Henry Ford had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, right? They wouldn't have said a car. They couldn't have imagined it. But what they wanted was to get from point A to point B and be able to do it faster. Okay. So 1, be really passionate about serving your customers. 2, listen for what they're really trying to do, not the details of how they're trying to do it. You should watch how they're trying to do it because there's things to learn from that, right? And don't be distracted by other possibilities, but do document them, keep them somewhere, because if you have to pivot, one of them might be the kernel of a really good idea. Okay, so we're going to do those things. The other part I want to talk about, we get excited about data and remote work, and we're on Zoom, and we're using generative AI. But what we forget is that to actually make something happen in the world, it takes, to actually make something happen in the world, it takes people. And people require communication that resonates with them. And what we don't spend enough time, and we see it in the polarization of the world in Canada, in the United States, everywhere, there's a lot of us, them, I'm right, you're wrong. That doesn't actually help us get a lot done. So understanding, okay, I'm right, you're wrong, but what if part of your wrong is right? What could I learn? Because we have to work together. We have to accomplish or face a curveball together. And learning how to communicate. One of my sons calls this my superpower, right? Because I was so bad at it, Arti. I was so bad at it when I was a teenager and when I was early in my leadership. I was like, I'm direct. I tell you how it is. Yeah, great. Most of the world feels like you're telling them to go F themselves. That doesn't work. But I'm still going to be me. But instead of, I'm direct, what does Arti need? What does Arti need to hear me? How can I appreciate her spiritual journey, her passion for entrepreneurship? And how do I meet her there? And when we've met there and she feels seen, then we can actually start dealing with a gnarly problem.
I'm hearing this as a common theme. Communication is the biggest, I think, area that companies and organizations and leaders must focus on to bring those siloed business units and siloed departments and teams and bring more alignment, right? Because I think when there is alignment, there is more adoption. Adoption happens, and when adoption happens, there's more success and there are more wins as a team, as a collaborative unit. And again, empathy is important, right? We miss out on that. Sometimes all you have to do is hold this space for somebody to listen. Sometimes, I get team members who are talking to me, and I've got myself, and I'm giving them a solution rather than listening and holding that space for them. We do it with our children sometimes. When you're in a rush, you just somebody would knock on the office door, or one of the children would come in, and they're sharing their problem, but you end up just giving them a solution very quickly. All you have to do is hold the space, and I think that's what happens as leaders. We got to hold the space for ideas. We have got to hold the space for innovation. We got to hold the space for critical thinking. We got to hold that space for our teams to thrive and feel that they have a part to say in that vision, and they've crafted that vision collaboratively with you. So I think I hear you on that front. Such an important aspect to build resilience, to build better teams. And also from a data standpoint, you got to listen to the data. Sometimes it could be, if you're not measuring the right metrics, as you said, it could be an impediment and could take you down a hill. So let's talk a little bit more about your journey over the years in technology and AI space, right? And you really, I'm going to shift the conversation. You talked about understanding your consumers, listening to your buyers, and creating and solving for your customers. So, buyer enablement, right? And buyer enablement is a topic that many organizations are talking about, but I think they're still scraping the surface, right? How can AI help companies enable their buyers and improve more overall experience? Do you have any use cases or any practical insights that companies could do it, even if they're not AI companies or they're just starting to use AI in their businesses?
Sure. So I think there's two things that come to mind here. The first is, how do you use AI to deeply and better understand your buyer? And so whether you create your own detailed profile and say to the AI, you are, and you describe, and the problems you're facing, and you describe. And I want to ask you a series of questions. And I want you, AI, to react to or tell me what value proposition resonates and why. So this is a synthetic buyer. And there are companies that are creating, I actually know a couple of them, really great synthetic buyers that they do a lot of that configuration for you. So there's Character Quilt, there's Alex, I'm involved. I know both of those companies. And it's wonderful, right? To use a tool to better understand and get inside the mind of your buyer. That helps you with what you push out. The thing that most salespeople and the vast majority of marketers don't understand about buyer enablement is that the most important conversations never involve the vendor. Ever. You're not in the room. It would be weird for you to be in the room. I don't care how compelling and charming you are. You're not coming in. So how can I, as a seller, help my buyer? Well, what are the things they need? They need to be able to tell people why they should meet with them to talk about this thing. Well, what if you craft that? You could use AI to help craft that. Here's my buyer. Here's all of our meeting notes. They want to invite these 5 people with these profiles to a meeting to talk about us. Please help me craft the email. Fabulous. Here's an email. You could make that a GPT tool and expose it to your customer to use, where they put in all of that information, but why do they need to do your job? So just that, the ability to create one slide, not branded, that explains what you offer that solves this problem 10x better with whatever's going to constitute as evidence.
Yeah.
One slide, right? Because they have to meet with people. They have very little time to put in Slack, Teams, Google Chat, or email. Hey, we need to get together. We were trying to solve this problem. I'd like to talk about our priorities and I'd like to get your feedback on this. Cool. They have a meeting. In the meeting, when they say, can I see it? Well, why shouldn't they have a short demo? But you could use AI to generate a demo that is customized to their particular view of the problem. So
Yeah.
now we have the email, the slide, the demo, and we didn't have to gin up a whole bunch of people to create them because we knew our customer, we knew our value, and we knew what they needed. So that's the basics. And it's the same without AI. AI just makes it easier to create those assets.
I think you can also feed your past historical data. That's great, by the way. And you could feed all of your past historical data points to your AI, in this case, in this use case, I would say to enable your buyers or even your customer success teams for that matter, to say, hey, when you have, just read.ai or Fireflies listening to your meeting notes, they should be trained in such a way that they should be possibly able to create certain notes, not just in CRM, but also suggest certain workflows to create more personalization for your buyers or more touch points for your customer success teams to do in the future based on the conversations you're having at this stage with your current customers or your new customers for your sales teams in that case. I think
right.
Technologies can do so much today that, you imagine it and it can do it for you, right? So I think personalization, various touch points, we see that CRMs have evolved, marketing tools have evolved, sales tools have evolved, even advertising technologies have evolved today to be able to listen to your customers and their intent even before the customer knows your brand, right? As you said they don't have to know your brand. So that's fantastic. Joelle, yes, please do add.
You have to read it. You have to review it. Like, you need to think of all these AIs as an assistant,
Of course.
not as an outsourced executive, right? Yes, they're getting better and they're improving, but I can tell when I get an email that's been generated.
Yeah. And I
And
think there's humanization that's missing, and that's what the downside of all the technology is. One, will become lazy, but will also might become non-personalized. Look at what has COVID's done. Events are now, it's taking us so much time to get back to events. We're more, I think I've heard from even C-suite and executives and leaders, it's for those, especially the younger generation of leaders, that those who went to universities or even, workforce, they joined, their first onboarding was on a Zoom call probably. They're a little paranoid going into an in-person meeting or an in-person event. They're feeling that anxiety and anxiousness. So I think there's downside, and there is an way to improve the lives using technology. How much to use, how to use, it's all up to us. And that's where I think the humanization will 100% be always there, right?
I love that. The other thing I think it can do, and I work with a lot of people on this, is because the technology gives you some scale, you can actually use it to help you arrest being a reactive hero and allow you to reset to being a strategic leader. And it's tempting because, look, when you're being a hero, it feels good, right? But you're reacting, you're not using the resources, and you're not seeing the whole world clearly, the whole curveball. When you can put a whole bunch of stuff into the AI. One of my favorites is, all right, from your CRM for the last 3 months, pull out all the notes from the customers who converted and bought and the similarly qualified customers who didn't buy. And ask the AI, what's the difference between these two groups? And what you're learning is, what's the urgency trigger? That's a strategic question, because once I understand the urgency trigger, now how do I find companies who are experiencing that trigger? Once they're experiencing it, what message do I use to reach them? What's the workflow to engage them? And so on and so on and so on. But that's moving from being reactive, we need more pipeline,
Yeah.
to strategic. We have to be thoughtful to get the right pipeline that's going to generate the revenue, because nobody pays rent off pipeline.
I agree with you. It's not a pipeline issue, and it's not a lead generation issue. It's not a demand generation issue. I think it's a go-to-market issue.
I agree.
And I think there's overall synchronization of various facets before customers can solve the revenue problem, I think. Sorry, companies can solve the revenue problem. So I think staying customer obsessed, staying revenue focused, but again, staying efficient, pivoting at the right time, but getting ready to pivot at all times, as I think I always say, because the economic conditions are going to change, and I think great organizations are ready, and they do scenario planning a lot more in their strategic planning to offset some of this, right?
I'm not a huge believer that we can anticipate all the curveballs. I think we need to build our strength and our resilience to be able to handle the curveballs as they come. So some curveballs, like the cancer curveball, there's no predicting that one, and it will be disruptive.
Yeah.
And if you have an approach to curveballs, if you have strength, whatever strength, different types of strength, if you have a team, if you know how to negotiate and communicate, you can face any curveball. Now, a wise thing, as I said when I told the story about the AI pivot, we weren't running our company to the last dollar. We had a reserve of capital. And then it became, how much of that capital are we prepared to use while we make this pivot? So I think that the actual prep for curveball is about strength training. It's about understanding how much risk you can tolerate, you being the organization and you being the individual. And then it's seeing the curveball, slowing yourself down, assessing the approach, which includes your focus, your strengths, your mindset, your resources, and your communication, your leadership. So when you do that, you can approach any curveball.
Well, thank you again, Joelle, for joining us. Tell us, where can our listeners find you? And I know that you have generously offered a resource that they could download as well.
Your listeners can find me at www.gtmgotomarketflow, one word, gtmflow.com. And if they go to gtmflow.com/measure marketing, they'll be able to download my quick start guide. It's free, to transforming from being a reactive hero to being a strategic leader. And it's totally free. It will help them today with the curveballs they're going to see today.
Oh, thank you so much. That's such an amazing resource. I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy it. And thanks for sharing that. Once again, it is gtmflow.com/measure marketing. And we'll put the link in the show notes as well. Thanks again, Joelle. This was really insightful. I enjoyed it, resonated with you on so many different levels. And thank you to our listeners. If you are listening to this episode and you liked it, I'm sure you have, please share it with your network. And don't forget to subscribe and share, other future episodes, and come back for more. Joelle, I think this is the first and for many that we have to cover in the future, because there's so much that I want to learn from you and talk to you about. So thanks once again, and we'll see you on the other side.
You bet. Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, which I'm sure you have, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your network. We'll see you on the other side.
Thank you for listening to the Fuel Your Marketing podcast. For more episodes, visit www.fuelyourmarketing.ca.